Well, firstly, thank you to our panelists. I'll allow Paul to introduce our panelists in a moment, but thank you all to attending. We've got 40 attendees now, and I had about 104, 105 registrants, which to us, I suppose it's very heartening. It shows that there is a desire to learn a little bit more on the business and the maybe sort of customer-facing front in the artisan cheese world. And so those of you, I suppose, who didn't come on the webinar before, or haven't sort of heard of the cheese set, in essence, I mean, I'll just read what I wrote this morning rather than try to wing it. So we're a group of professionals committed to assisting the artisan cheese sector connect with the public, be that in having a healthy business model, enabling sustainability, an enhanced product promoting consumer retention, or providing narrative and message that meaningfully engages with the customer. And so as the cheese set, we're Eric Wood, a business consultant, and latterly over the last year or so has been making himself aware of the artisan cheese world. Paul Thomas will be known to many of you as the country's leading cheesemaking and dairy consultant. Andrew Till, who's part of the cheese set, branding and design, and also technology, social media consultant. And me, I'm a cheesemaker and a wine and cheese presenter. And we have a new addition to the team, and we'll introduce him a little later on when he joins us, hot-footing it back from the West Country. And so the cheese set, I suppose we aim to be a dynamic group of individuals, and we plan to evolve with the needs of the marketplace in order to assist those championing, or those champions already doing so much to further the cause of artisan cheese. And you'll meet three of the most prominent protagonists in that story in a moment. And we wish to provide them and others in the industry with help to I suppose, bring our territorials to life, to show new opportunities for them to connect with the public. And we believe that there's tremendous opportunity out there, and we're thrilled that our three panelists could join us, and with the I suppose the encouraging feeling that we're getting already in our endeavors. So we've got three topics for our panelists, and I'm going to hand over to Paul now to put the first of those to them, and to say a few more words about our the panelists who've joined us this afternoon. Paul.
Okay, thank you. Our panelists won't actually need introductions to many of you, but for those of you who aren't aware of them, today we have Jason Hines, who is Director of Neal's Yard Dairy and Borough Cheese Company. We have John Farrand, Managing Director of the Guild of Fine Food and organiser of the Great Taste Awards and World Cheese Awards, as well as a Director of the Academy of Cheese. And finally, we have Catherine Mead, OBE, owner of Liner Dairies in Cornwall and Chair of the Specialist Cheesemakers Association, representing small-scale artisan cheesemakers in the UK. So we'll go to our first question, and maybe if we could answer in the order that we've just gone through. So Jason, John, Catherine. The first question that I have for you, and you have 2 minutes each. What can the artisan cheesemaker do to capitalise on branding opportunities?
I looked at that question and I thought about a slightly different question, which was, what can the artisan cheesemaker do to create a strong brand? Because I honestly believe that understanding what it is you're trying to make and how it is you can make it such that it is an exceptional cheese is what's going to help you create the strong brand. In a way, sometimes I think businesses generally, not necessarily cheese businesses, but a lot of businesses think about, you know, what's around the thing rather than the thing itself. And I truly believe that, you know, in the years that I've been selling cheese, the only thing that is important to me, and it's only in recent years that I've even sort of started to engage with words like brand or marketing or social media or any of these things, because it's not been that relevant to my success or the success of the cheese that it is that I'm trying to communicate to a market. You know, our mission statement is something in our business that we've only come up with in the last few years, which is improving British cheese. And I think that's what drives us. And I think in order to make a successful artisan cheese brand, or any brand actually, that is the thing that should be your guiding light. Without that quality and without that drive, that, you know, without striving to improve that quality day by day, year on year, in a way, what goes around that, which would be, you know, the branding opportunities, make the whole thing rather hollow, because that's not what's going to carry the thing forward. So I think, you know, building out around the cheese that it is, understanding what cheese it is you want to make and how you can make it the best that it can be, is the thing that gives purpose and gives the thing essence. And then what you build around that, which I think is the branding, you know, in a way, that's the easy bit. So, you know, there are other people on this panel who know much more about branding than me, but I think in terms of building a strong brand, unless you've thought about those primary questions about what it is I want to make, how am I going to make it the best that it can be, and how can I improve it? If you haven't engaged with those questions, then I think the rest of it is kind of peripheral.
Thank you.
Good with time, Beth. You've been practicing, haven't you?
Sorry?
You've been practicing, Jason. That was
I haven't, but anyway.
Okay, and same question to John, please.
Slightly concerned that 2 minutes is rather a long time now, having listened to Jason. That's very impressive. The word branding and artisan cheese, I think, in the 70s and 80s would have not even gone together. I can remember cheesemakers then who marketing and branding was kind of a sordid word. So I'm actually encouraged that this question leads this discussion, really, because at least it's being talked about. I slightly struggle, and slightly echo some of Jason's points. I slightly struggle with the word brand. I had a meeting with an organization a few weeks ago where they continually talked about their makers and producers as brands. And that sort of wound me up a bit, because people make food. Personality in cheese is just that. It's the maker's personality. And I feel that, okay, yes, it's got to look good. The packaging's got to look of a standard and be of a standard. But I wrestle slightly with that as well, because most of our cheese or artisan cheese is sold in a counter. Really difficult to brand in a chiller. Obviously easier with pre-pack. But all that said, cheese should continue to look at creating brands. We've got to connect the people, the place, even the process behind that brand. But for me, brand is so much more than coming up with a whizzy name or a whizzy packaging design. The elements for brand are complicated and must reflect the person who has made that cheese. So yeah, that's me.
Wonderful. You didn't even need the bell, John. That's fabulous.
That's because it was too short.
Succinct.
Okay, and as a cheesemaker, Catherine, what's your take on this?
My take on it. Well, I get the short straw here because I come third, don't I? So it's hard to come up with the original ideas, other than to say, you know, I completely agree with all that John and Jason have said about brand. I think that if we step back from thinking about branding, i.e. that process which is to stamp a mark, to stamp a logo, to stamp a visual identity on the cheese, and to think about the reflection of our product and how we get that product to market. What are the things that we would call brand values that are wrapped up in that product? So we have the people that work within the business, the milk, the animals that are supplying that milk, the farming methods that have come to supply that, the ultimate cheese, and how that cheese differentiates itself from other cheeses in the market. And then we think of the branding as a reflection of all those points that we've come through. So if we're looking at something that is very cutting edge and very futuristic, not that there is much of that in artisan cheesemaking, typically we're reflecting craft and traditional, and it doesn't mean to say we're oldie worldy and we're looking back, but we are looking at things. I think for most cheese makers, being authentic is really important, actually reflecting not what we think we should be doing, not what we think we should be saying, not what we think we might do, or indeed what others do, but what we do. Actually, what we do in the brand is very important. And when we get through to that point of branding, and John and Jason very eloquently said, you know, a brand is not really just about the design part of it, but when we do get to that design part, it's so important to be memorable, so that when the consumer comes to point of purchase, that identity, that visual identity, can trigger that memory of, I've had that before and I liked it, or even I haven't had that before, it looks interesting. So we do need to give great credence and great thought to how we design that work that sits around our brand, to ensure that we get that loyalty of purchase and we build up familiarity and something that lives with people, to have repeat purchases and repeat customers. And although I at risk of blowing my own trumpet, and I don't really, because it wasn't my invention, but wrapping a cheese in nettles makes for very, very simple branding because it differentiates so easily. So many people do not necessarily know the name Yarg, but they certainly remember when I say it's a cheese wrapped in nettles. Oh, I know, I've had that. So finding that key point of difference makes life so much easier for developing loyalty around the product, and then everything else that we're all about has to be assimilated within our brand values.
Wonderful. I actually cheated there. I gave you 3 minutes, Catherine, because you came last.
Whoa.
But it was all very worthwhile. Well, thank you for those three. What we have now is a little poll on our 3 questions. So to cover, to some extent, the next question that Paul will be posing, and the last one. But we have a little poll just to find out, I suppose, how contented. This is for the cheesemakers amongst our audience, how contented they are with their branding, social media, and PR endeavors. Now, this isn't something that we are fishing for business for or anything along those lines. It's all totally anonymous. It's just to find out whether the industry or the artisan industry feels that everything is being taken care of, or whether there are gaps. So I'm going to launch the poll now. And so if the cheesemakers in our audience, and hopefully we've got an audience of 70 at the moment, we're delighted, that there'll be a fair proportion of cheesemakers in there. If you could, I'm going to launch the poll now. If you could answer the 3 questions, as I said, it's anonymous, confidential. You certainly won't be chased by us for pitching for business. And so if you could take a couple of minutes to fill that poll, and any cheesemakers on the panel, you're very welcome to do that as well, if you've got a moment. So, well, just the headlines. So we are on our first questions. I'm confident that my business is effectively exploiting its branding potential. Nobody strongly disagreed, so we're in a good place there. Where nobody's feels that they're in dire straits in their branding. But really, in the middle ground, sort of 3 neutral, 4 agree, same number, 12 cheesemakers put each. So it's good. It's good. We're not doing a bad job, but maybe a little more polishing. Second, I'm confident my business is effectively exploiting the opportunities presented by social media. Neutral, 18 cheesemakers there versus 7 with agree and 4 with strongly agree. So we're in the middle ground there. So we're a very new, I suppose, relatively new way of marketing for somebody. I am anyway. The last 2 or 3 years, I've had to throw myself into it. Finally, giving up the ghost of writing letters to my clients and others. So right, then finally, I'm confident my business is effectively exploiting the opportunities presented by PR, press relations, not proportional representation. So disagree, so 49%, nearly 50% of people disagreed that they were exploiting the opportunities presented by PR. And we will move back to Paul and the second question.
Okay, so second question, I think we might shake the order up a little bit as well. So we have, what social media opportunities are there for the Artisan Cheesemaker? Maybe if we could pose that to John first of all.
I think this for me is perhaps where the biggest opportunity of it. I mean, if the question is, what can artisan cheesemakers do with marketing, and how good are they at marketing, which without sort of being too controversial, traditionally they haven't been brilliant. But social media is a huge opportunity actually, where we can attack that sort of rather new food lovers, the millennials, the hipsters, call them whatever definition you want, but they are an age group or a generation that are inherently interested in their food and drink, where it comes from, how it tastes, and we see it where people are spending less money. They're spending more money on fewer occasions on eating out. This was certainly before lockdown, and also investing more money in better food when they go out shopping, and that is a fact. And those millennials, the ones that aren't vegans, obviously, have a huge interest in really good coffee, really good cider, and really good cheese. And I think there's a great opportunity on social media for artisan cheesemakers to communicate all the beautiful things that go with cheese making, where I've bored on before about how close cheese making is at the artisan level. It's an art form, and it should be considered an art form, and that sort of blend of art and science and terroir that goes into making cheese makes for great social media, explaining the farming methods, showing people who can't visit farms what they're like, getting them to see sort of milking, talking about beautiful cheese, how to pair things, cooking ideas, even simple things that perhaps we as an audience take for granted about how to cut and present a decent cheese board. That is wonderfully social media friendly for an audience that until now has probably been slightly ignored by some artisan cheesemakers.
Very good.
Thank you. And if we could ask the same question of Catherine, please.
So John's talked a little bit about content, all of which I completely agree with, but just thinking about the kind of marketing, and you mentioned marketing, John, the marketing opportunities in social media. Like Francis, this is certainly a new world for me, and I come from a very traditional, conventional marketing background, so it's taking some sort of work to work around it. But the things that I believe we have found with the Specialist Cheesemaker Association, and indeed as a business, is working together and collaboratively is really, really helpful. So you get this build of audience if you cross market, you market with other brands, you work with other brands, maybe related brands. It could be your ciders and beers. It could be people, other producers who are geographically close. It could be, in my case, a group of Cornish cheesemakers. We all get together through social media. We get greater volume. We can send that further. We can tell pictures through stories. So there seems to be no limit to how many photographs and videos one can amass and need to really launch a good social media campaign. So thinking about seasonal change, getting down to the farm, looking at the things that are going on the farm, telling our stories about the farm through pictures, building loyalty through quick and time-limited offers. You know, not being that producer that's forever on the screen saying here's 20% off, but you know, why don't you try a new cheese that we've just brought out? Buy one that you know and have a sample of this alongside it. Or why not try this for a change and put 2 cheeses together? And by the same token, launching of recipes seems to be a really good way of getting newness and quickness, and particularly again if you cross-link with other products, so that you can say to another producer, hey, how about we do a recipe for, and we have our cheese and your fish in it, or whatever it may be. And then finally, I think one of the really effective things that John, Jason and I worked on quite a bit through lockdown was the power of champions, and having key individuals who will sing for us, because they are the voice of objectivity, they step back a bit, and if they have great following, and we're very lucky in cheese, we have some amazing champions, absolutely stunning champions who have really significant address books, and if they say it's good, then that is the greatest sort of you know, that they're the greatest spokesman we can have. It's so much better and more powerful than when we say it ourselves. So cultivating champions is, I think, a really powerful thing to do on social media.
Thank you. And finally, Jason.
Well, like Catherine just said, it's only in recent times that I've sort of stopped resisting the kind of the in our own business, the sort of drive to really move much more towards social media. And it's only in the last, really, I think probably since lockdown, I've really began to appreciate just how powerful it is and how useful it can be, both to our business but also to the cheesemaker, because you know, there's an opportunity, John alluded to it, to really communicate not just to your business, the business markets, the B2B market you might want to reach as a cheesemaker, which is great. You can show shops and restaurants what you do. You know, you can confirm the authenticity of what you do through pictures and films and so on. You can demonstrate the sort of the provenance of the cheese that you make in a way that is much easier than maybe, you know, writing it up and circulating it in the older sort of rather more drawn out ways. But also, I think what I've come to understand is that you know, the market, Catherine talked about champions, and what I've realized is that the power of social media to reach parts of the market that many people on this call will, you know, we're all engaged in the cheese world, and we're all to a degree in this call preaching to the converted. But what became clear to me during lockdown in particular is that social media has this amazing power to be able to reach the unconverted, who actually, if we really want to help the British artisan cheese industry, really our challenge is to understand how we communicate to those people consumers who don't understand what it is that these cheesemakers do, you know, this is a way that you really can reach those people. And you know, it was during the last 6 months that through social media, we were able to reach hundreds and hundreds of people, you know, who came back to us and said, wow, I've never had cheese like that before. I didn't know cheese could taste so good. And those would be people who would normally buy their cheese in supermarkets or the conventional outlets, and yet were blown away by how good British cheese could be. And the way that that door was open to them was through the door of social media. And I think that we shouldn't underestimate, you know, obviously the approach that we take when we use social media might be modified according to which consumer we want to reach, whether it's the more converted or someone that maybe knows less about farmhouse cheese than some of the people that like to be on this call. But you know, I now have come full circle to really sort of you know, kneel at the throne of social media. I think Instagram in particular has got a huge part to play in our futures.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I? We've been very good on time, I must say. I was wondering, Paul, if I could just interject here. Jason, you mentioned that there's some specifics there, Instagram in particular.
Yeah.
Can I just ask, which are the channels to connect to the public? I mean, can I put it to Catherine first? I mean, as a cheesemaker, where do you find your audience, or how does your audience find you on social media? Is it Instagram? Is it Facebook? Is it LinkedIn?
We differentiate completely. We're not great users of LinkedIn. We use Twitter for more business to business and more business-like discussions. We use Facebook principally as quite an internal mechanism. We found it quite helpful to have, we have our own dairy community, if you like, and they like to chat, literally have a discussion. So they tend to gather around Facebook. But most of our outward facing consumer based social media is with Instagram now.
Okay. Interesting. And can I put the same to John, with obviously more of sort of promoting it to the public and through the Guild of Fine Food?
Yeah, certainly the awards hangs out big style on Instagram and Twitter. When we're judging, the noise around that is on Instagram and Twitter. When the results are released, there's lots of chat and there. We do some things on Facebook when we were promoting our training courses. We would use Facebook for that. So different activities. I'm not the expert, as you can tell, because I'm floundering slightly, but different activities, different platforms for whatever we're doing is how I see it, and what I ask is kind of done.
Thank you, John. And Jason?
Well, I mean, we again, I'm not the one who manages this. You know, I contribute sometimes, but that's as far as it goes. But what I can say is that yeah, while we use all three media, Instagram is the one where we have much more engagement. It's the one where we have many more followers, and it's the one where, you know, where if we are looking to communicate the authenticity of a cheese, or the quality of the cheese, or how you might cut the cheese, the place where you can do that really effectively, or where you can, I think, most effectively demonstrate to the audience, whether business to business or whether businesses or consumers, the one where those two you know, those two audiences seem to engage the best. If you want to demonstrate to them what it is that you do, or as a cheesemaker or as a business like ours, it seems to be Instagram is where we get by far the best engagement.
Okay. That's interesting. So we've really only mentioned Instagram, Twitter, and a little bit of Facebook, but Facebook more sort of internally or possibly locally as well. I mean, if you're targeting a local audience as a cheesemaker, Facebook probably or possibly still has more relevant. Anyway, thank you for that. And it was going off-piste a little bit, but I'll hand back to Paul for the last question.
Thank you. And just before I pose the final question, just a reminder to the audience, if you have any questions for the panel for the Q&A at the end, if you want to just start typing those into the chat box, and we'll pick those up right at the end. So question 3, and I think this time if I can pose it first of all to Catherine, then Jason, then John. How can the artisan cheesemaker make the most of PR avenues open to them?
So I think as a starter for 10, and we've already really touched on this, PR was the acronym for press relations, and it also sometimes applied to public relations. And given the role of press in the context of social media, as we've just discussed, I think we need to focus on public relations, of which press relations can be a subset. From a personal point of view, and this is my personal belief, I think that has never been more important for us to tell our story. We know that we have a public out there who are really interested in provenance, integrity of food, where their food has come from, how it's been produced, how far it's traveled, what level of freshness there is, and they are really keen, willing, and able to engage in those conversations. And we had a recent, during lockdown, we got involved in the Great British Cheese Weekend in May, and we were doing a live tasting, and we were on the farm. And when we got to the Q&A, over half the questions were for people saying, can I come and be on your farm, please? Can I come down to your farm? Can I stay on your farm? Can I come and make cheese with you? And so I believe the role of press and public relations it's never been more important to tell these stories and to bring people into our lives, you know, and imagine what it must be like to be so removed from cheese making, because we assume people know what it looks like, and why should people? If you were living in inner city Manchester, why on earth would you know what it looks like on a farm and a cheese dairy in West Cornwall? You wouldn't have a clue. So we need to keep telling those stories. And there are 2 reasons why I think this is so vital. One is because it sets us apart from industrial food, and that is really, really key. And the second is that I think we buy ourselves that greater level of respect and credibility, and we have that respect that we deserve. You know, we have put so much care, attention, and detail into what we are producing, and therefore what people are going to eat. And we need to tell that. We need to tell that in detail and in stories, so that when people come to buy our cheese, they're buying a bit of the story. And that actually goes full circle and all the way back to brand and brand values, I believe, you know, and that is all part of it. So in fact, I think there is an absolutely inextricable link and a complete merge between the development of our brand and how we reflect it in social media and in our public and press relations. It's all part of the same big story, and it is just actually telling stories and showing it visually and in pictures, and bringing people in their homes down to the farm and down to the dairy, and joining in with us and becoming part of our community.
Thank you. And same question to Jason, please.
Well, Catherine, thank you for stealing nearly all the points. But anyway,
The danger of going second.
I think I feel sorry for John. The key point, though, is as you just rightly said, is that building on, creating and/or building public or press relations is dependent on how well you do the first two things that we've just covered in the previous two questions. But there are some things to watch out for. If you haven't focused on, if you're not clear about the quality, what it is you want to set out to make as a cheesemaker, you're not clear about how you're going to do that, and the thing that you're producing hasn't got heart and hasn't got quality, and you haven't got a trajectory in your mind about how you're going to improve that quality over time, then it will be hollow. Equally, if when you communicate that via social media or through any other through any other channel, if you are telling a story, I know that Catherine was saying tell the story, but there's telling stories and there's telling stories. You know what I mean? There's a lot of that goes on, and in branding, I'm always very, very wary of. John, I think I can't remember the expression that you just used when we were talking about brands, but a company name which has got something kind of a fuzzy wuzzy kind of name attached to it, and doesn't really sort of, I like a brand which is a sense of the place where the thing comes from, tells you what it is, you can trust it, you can trust it, and so if it's the old cheesy corner, I'm already skeptical about the quality of the product, and I'm also going to be expecting that someone's going to be telling a story and dressing it up. So I think so long as those first two things have been, if you've got something which is a great cheese, you're looking to improve it, you're talking to your audience about the provenance of that, the quality of that, the authenticity of that, then those other things will naturally create, press, that will improve your public relations and press relations. But without those first two things, the whole thing is hollow.
Thank you. And so finally, if John, you would like to answer question number 3, please.
Yeah, it's slightly ironic, really, that as an industry, if we are an industry, artisan cheesemakers, the most, in inverted commas, effective PR we've had in recent times was at the beginning of lockdown, when there was a lot written about the plight of artisan cheesemakers. Radio 4 was full of it. Farming, I wake up in the middle of the night and listening to Farming Today, absolutely full, and that in a way was kind of PR. It was a PR opportunity. I'm sure no one span it as much, and it was a slightly sad irony in some ways. I'm going to be probably more functional, because lots of points have been covered about straight press relations. At the moment, because I'm sort of obviously close to journalists, we publish magazines, there is an awful lot of opportunity, which is a good thing for artisan cheesemakers, because quite frankly, journos are short of stories. And when they're short of stories, they need content. So there's lots of opportunity at the moment to tell that genuine story. Jason, I'm with you there. Also, it's important as a cheesemaker to establish what sets you apart in your press release. If you're writing a press release or you have an agency, make sure you're newsworthy, make sure that you are linked to either new products or an event. The easy one for us at the moment will be Christmas, and by Jove, we need a decent last quarter and a decent Christmas. So make the seasonal significance of your cheese. Contacts obviously are key. Not everyone can afford to use a press office or an agency. I accept that, but those contacts are really, really important. That said, most good journos don't necessarily want to talk to the PR. They'll want to talk to the cheesemaker or someone very close to it, because that's where they get their point of difference in terms of a decent story and a decent line. So you're important. I'm talking to everyone who's a cheesemaker. You are important. You are interesting to a journo. That's what they want. I would say this, but if you've won awards, get that out there. Journos like picking up on stories about winning things, not just my awards, but any awards. And make sure you send them good pics. And everyone, journos are inherently reasonably lazy. And if you send them good pics and good content, they'll use it. So my bit was a bit functional, sorry.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, all of you. I mean, that provides a tremendous content. Andy has been scribbling away these pearls of wisdom that we can hopefully pass on after the webinar. But now we've got an opportunity. There are a few questions there. I'm going to hand over to Eric, and Eric will invite members of the audience to pose their questions. So, and I shall unmute you as we do. Eric, all yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Francis. There seem to be about 4 categories of questions. One set around design and packaging, one set relating to social media, and then there's some questions relating to product mix and what I should be making for Christmas. And then lastly, some questions around how to become the optimal path to becoming an artisan cheesemaker. So I'm going to, given the focus of the webinar, I'm going to suggest we start with design and packaging. And so, Francis, can I invite you to unmute Ismail Wabi? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
You had a question about design. Ismail, are you with us?
Yeah, if you could unmute.
He doesn't look like he's unmuted yet.
Oh, I did just that.
Maybe he has to unmute himself.
Yeah, there we are. Good.
Hi, Ismail.
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, good. Yeah, please go ahead. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I have 3 questions. The first question is about, from my experience, I don't live in England. I've been making cheese, South American cheese varieties in Egypt, actually. And my opinion, or from my experience, I noticed that the design, or whatever design I do, is it only converts for the first time, but what actually brings the client back is normally the quality of cheese. Yeah. So I don't know whether this is a normal case, or this sometimes the design actually plays a role in the second and third purchase. Okay, this is the first question. The second question is about what works best on Instagram to get more followers. I don't want to convert people. I want to have more followers. So in my case, I want to know whether it's better to do stories, posts, or IGTV. Okay. The third question is, whenever I do something on Instagram, for me to boost sales, I have to do a discount. Are there any other ideas apart from doing a discount to boost my sales? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ismail, and thank you for joining us from Egypt. That's great. Can I open that first question? Just the first question. We'll come back to Ismail's other questions in a moment. Can I open that up to the panel?
Sorry, would you mind just repeating the first question again? I beg your pardon, Eric.
Let me just. He said that in his experience, the design is only used. The packaging design is only useful for attracting the first clients. But that's not enough to retain clients. It's really about the quality of the cheese. does that fit with, I mean, I think it's confirming what's already been said, but does that fit with your experience?
I mean, I don't mind answering that one first. I would say, obviously, the selling environments differ. In the one that I sell into, actually, the packaging comes after the cheese. So I know, but many other environments, you know, first what people see is the packaging, not the cheese, not the way around the environment. Not that, which is not my usual experience. But what I would agree that, you know, what's going to bring back customers back time and again is quite, you know, it's an obvious thing to say, but it is the quality of the cheese. I would also say the other thing to pay attention to with packaging, and something that sometimes I think is, you know, more time could be spent on, is not what the look of the packaging is, although that is of course very important. And I often think packaging has got there's too much color, too much detail. It's very confusing, and I like simplicity. So strip it back as much as possible, I think, is a really, really good thing, so that it actually, simplicity will perversely cause your product to stand out in the counter where there's lots of other things. But I also think that very often the packaging is also the home for the cheese. And there has not been enough consideration paid to how well is that packaging looking after the quality of the cheese while it's in it. And I think time spent on that is ultimately going to give the consumer a better experience. And if the cheese is good and they enjoy it and the packaging has kept it well, then they will buy it more frequently. So I think those are the two things I would say about that.
Thank you very much. And any further comments from Catherine or John?
I would just say that it's interesting that Ismail thinks that his products are being bought and picked up and tried, but after that, people are not going back to the packaging. So one or other element isn't working as well as it might work. You know, if he's feeling that, if you're feeling as man, you're not getting that repeat purchase, it's one or other isn't working. So I think with packaging, the thing I'd add to what Jason has just said is, bear in mind, you're probably having to produce a cheese that can be sold in all sorts of different presentations, whether it's deli counters, on shelves, in restaurants, cafes. You know, you've got so many different places it's going to go to. So I completely subscribe to simplicity, but I also personally like to have strength of brand identity, that it becomes very quick and familiar in those places where you haven't got somebody to represent your cheese and sell your cheese. So, you know, when it gets into a place where actually it relies on the consumer, the purchaser, to do the work, you make life as easy for them as possible and make it very distinctive. So cheese is always first, always, every single time, because you know, you can design the most beautiful pack, but people won't pick it up twice if the cheese within it isn't delicious. But the recognition and brand loyalty, the ability to keep going back to it, will be significantly enhanced. It's easy to spot.
Thank you both very much. In the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the next question, still sticking with packaging. Francis, can I ask you to unmute Martin Moyden? He had two questions related to packaging. Martin, are you with us?
I'm just doing it now. So if you could unmute yourself, Martin.
Ismail, would you mind unmuting yourself again?
Martin you should be able to talk now, Martin, if you unmute yourself. We've lost it. He's disappeared off the participant list and into the webinar, so he should be able to speak.
Okay.
Do you want
Martin,
to
are you?
I'll come back to Martin.
Okay. Well, let's move on to some of the social media questions then while we're waiting for Martin. Ismail's, just going back to Ismail's question about social media, what works best in Instagram to get more followers? In the case of cheese artisans, is it stories, is it posts, or is it IGTV? I confess I'm not sure what IGTV stands for. Does that?
Instagram TV, I don't know much about it, but it's I suppose it's Instagram step into YouTube's world, allowing them to have longer videos. And then he asked us another question related to social media. What ideas do you have to boost sales on social media without having to do a discount or a sale? Would anybody, can I open that up to the whole panel? Would anybody like to comment, respond to those questions?
Again, enormous caveat that I am not a social media marketing expert, but I personally would be concerned about heavily or discounting regularly across social media. For me, it would devalue some integrity in your cheese. Others may disagree, and other marketeers may disagree. I'd almost rather give something for nothing. Come and visit my farm. Come and actually give it a certain quantity, a manageable quantity of cheese away for free is almost better than discounting the whole time as an offer on social media. Just on the Instagram thing, again, not an expert. I know we get a lot more followers when we encourage all our judges in the room to be posting lots of pictures of delicious food and drink, what they thought of it. It just encourages interaction and you just get more followers. That's terribly simplistic, for which I apologize for, but that's my experience.
Thanks, John. Any other comments?
I might just very simply add that one of the things that might help you to understand how you might get more followers would be to study a little bit more what type of post increases or does not increase engagement. So, if you look at, in recent months, the posts that are close-ups, beautiful pictures of just cheese, looking, beautiful and seductive, gets a greater level of engagement, or, very short films with the cheese being cut, or some kind of, human to cheese contact, if you like, seems to get a lot more engagement. And obviously the more engagement that you have, you would imagine the more you are going to get followers.
Great, thank you, Jason.
We had another question I noticed from George Keane on can branding affect the quality of the cheese? Or let's ask George to ask the question. So I will actually promote him to a panelist. And so George will be joining West Country Cheesemaker. And so George, are you happy to join us? Hopefully you'll be able to come on. You're there? Do you want to unmute yourself, or yes, if you can unmute yourself. There we are,
George. Thank you. It's just really a matter of priorities. The quality of the cheese must come first, and I think a cheesemaker needs to be able to manufacture his milk and the product he wants to make. And you really need somebody else to be doing this sort of media and selling and marketing. As a cheesemaker, I know I'm good at cheese making, but marketing I'm not good at, and I can be distracted if I'm not careful.
Would anybody like to comment on that from the panel? Is it somebody else's job entirely, or I won't lead you? Go on.
I would say, I mean, we've all fessed up to not being the people responsible for social media within our respective businesses. But I do think that when we speak, it has a greater authenticity. So John mentioned earlier, you know, journalists would prefer to talk to the cheesemaker than to the PR person. And indeed, by the same token, there are some moments when I think as cheesemakers, we need to be conveying the messages because we do give that authenticity. Sometimes we're not so good at the mechanics. So I would reiterate that point that John made. I would never discount on social media, the cheese on social media. I might encourage some kind of links or sampling, or, you know, try this cheese and, you know, for Christmas or whatever it may be, but I wouldn't go into anything that's likely to have a long-term effect on devaluing the brand. But I do think we sometimes play a role as being part and parcel of the personality of the brand as cheesemakers.
Okay, anybody else, or we could take another question. We have one or two from Cheesemakers. There's one, in fact, here, a deadly serious one from Roger Longman. How much cheese should I make for Christmas? There we are. There's one for the wholesalers amongst us. I'm going to allow Roger to unmute himself, because Roger and White Lake make a phenomenal range of cheeses, and I would imagine I'd be interested to know how somebody with up to 28 cheeses in their portfolio can plan for Christmas. So I'll unmute you, Roger. So you're joining us as a panelist. If you want to unmute yourself, then when you're with us, there we are. So Roger, are you happy to ask that question to the panel? How much cheese should you make for Christmas?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, obviously we are a bit mad and we make such a huge range of cheeses, which is a problem all in its own right. Normally for Christmas, you know, we see how sales have increased in the year, and, you know, we make a little bit more for Christmas because there's a pattern. This year, obviously, there is no pattern. It's sort of business is back up to where it should be at this time of year, but I've zero idea what's going to happen at Christmas. And I suppose it's asking, like Jason, who are sort of closer to the coal face of selling, what they think is going to happen.
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, that's for sure. And we have been in discussions today in our own business asking exactly the same question, Roger. But, you know, without knowing, you know, quite how the landscape around us is going to change, you know, what we do know is that, you know, there's going to be possibly a depression or, you know, less footfall in shops. Certainly in our own shops, we're anticipating having maybe 60 to 70% less turnover in our shops because of the inability to put as many customers into the shop as we would normally in the really busy period. And so that social distancing is just a massive limitation. We're expecting that quite a few of those customers will buy as they did during lockdown on mail order, on e-commerce. And so I guess there's two questions to ask yourself, not just the question of how much should I make, but what should I make? Because if you've got a cheese that, you know, is going to have to maybe spend a bit more time passing through, you know, the hands of, you know, the wholesaler that would maybe have sold more to shops, but is now going to sell a lot more of that cheese through e-com. It's going to have to go down a packing line. You might want to think a bit more about the range that you've got and which of the cheeses that are going to be able to be more e-com friendly, because it's going to be the largest e-commerce Christmas in history. You make a lot of lovely cheeses, and some of them are really, some of them are more fragile than others. So I think that would be the other question I'd be asking myself. But I'm definitely overall expecting, we're all expecting, a big demand in certain, we're expecting certain categories to be more impacted than others, and there are shortages at the moment. So what you make, I think is probably going to be the first thing. And then once you've done that, how much to make, you're going to have to, make that call closer to the time. But I'm expecting retail footfall to be down and e-com to be up. Maybe not quite compensate one for the other, but not far away from it. People are going to spend money still, I think.
Roger,
okay,
answer your question?
I think he's answered as well as he can, to be honest. I tend to agree with what he's saying on that. I mean, it's always a nightmare for us trying to get wholesalers to give us forecasts, because their customers never give them forecasts, and this year it's just like, well, they don't even know who their customers are this year. So
exactly, yeah.
I mean, just to add, historically, a lot of us are old enough to remember, recessions are normally quite good for good food makers and good food retailers. Especially at the moment, and I have no pleasure in saying this because people are eating out less, and I'm sad about that as well. But that may mean that this Christmas is slightly more indulgent for a lot of people, because they will buy better things to eat at home. And if we're clever, I don't mean that in a nasty way, then we can make something of that. That would be an observation. I'd also just extending, or sort of almost ask Jason this, is the successful arrival of not just cheese, but any food product part of your marketing strategy, if you like? Because if it's all going to shift to e-com, as you say, getting that product safely to the customer is part of your whole image and marketing. We all do it. We all look at the boxes we receive. If some of them are buggered and broken, it's irritating. And actually that can slightly undermine all the good work of a delicious cheese, perhaps.
Absolutely. I mean, I said earlier on that, when Ismail asked the question about the packaging, I think that paying attention to what cheese is wrapped in, and indeed what box does that cheese once wrapped go into, and then what kind of fill do you put in that box? People are also concerned about the environment. They're concerned about what kind of fill you might use. We're using these wool liners, which are pretty amazing, but they're a bit more expensive, but they're really good for cheese and keeping cool in. So I think all of these things, the whole package, is more important now than ever it has been before, not just because it needs to keep the product well, keeps the cheese well, but actually, people are really paying attention to these details, quite rightly, and that's not going to go away. In fact, if anything, with global warming, David Attenborough signing up, to Instagram just in the last couple of days, with record numbers of followers, people are really concerned about the environment, and I think that we need to pay attention to that when if you send something out in a box with loads of plastic peanuts in it, you might not have that customer back again now. It would have been fine 5 or 10 years ago, but now I don't think you can get away with it.
Can I add a quick point on the e-commerce part? We would also agree that we're likely to see a huge uplift in e-commerce based on the uplift we had in lockdown. So we're already seeing, even this week, a resurgence of e-commerce again, and people going back to buy online rather than going back to the shops. And we can only see that increasing at Christmas. So another significant consideration is how are the couriers going to bear up at this time. So couriers got very unreliable at sort of the early days of lockdown, when everyone was ordering online, and then it sort of settled back down again. Couriers are really not as reliable as normal on a regular Christmas. So it really concerns me that we're going to be potentially delivering a short service to customers if our couriers, you know, are overwhelmed, and I suspect they really will be overwhelmed. So that gives even more importance. It's actually even more importance to the packaging, because it may well be on the move in transit for, you know, 48 hours or more, which isn't great.
Yep. Wonderful. Thank you for that. I think we'll begin to wrap things up. We're running a little bit over already, but not too badly. I'm going to just introduce to, well, probably nobody. Most of you will know Patrick McGuigan, and I'm going to ask him to unmute himself if he's able to, and just say hello, because Patrick is joining us at the Cheese Set as a consultant on matters press related, so PR, press relations rather than, well, public as well, because I mean Patrick can help with social media strategies, as well as assistant with new product development and one or two other areas. But just further strengthening, I hope, the offer that we can provide. Patrick, would you like to say any words? Have you prepared any? Not that I've asked you to.
No, it's been fascinating listening to the conversation, actually, and I think there's loads that can be done in cheese around marketing and packaging. Actually, the discussion around packaging I think is really interesting. I think there could be a lot if you look at other food sectors. If you look at craft beer, or if you look at chocolate, the kind of packaging design that you see in those products is amazing, and actually has nothing to do with the product. In the, you know, you can see amazing chocolate wrappers that are nothing to do with cocoa beans, or, you know, they're patterns, designs. And it's a bit different with cheese, because often it's you know, the packaging comes off in the counter. But I still think there's loads of stuff that can be done around artwork, and actually using the cheese. We were tasting a Swedish cheese today called Alnus Tegel, and actually in the rind were little babies' footprints, and there's a story to do with the tiles at the creamery, and there was a child's footprint, but actually it looks amazing. The actual whole cheese, that actually in the rind they've sort of imprinted designs like you would get with Taleggio, for example. So I think all that stuff about making cheese stand out on the counter, or if it's pre-packaged on the shelf, there's a lot around that. And just around the marketing and PR side of things, I think it's been fascinating during lockdown how cheesemakers have really upped their game in marketing and PR. And for a long time, I think they haven't really done much at all, you know, a lot of cheesemakers, but it's been great to see a lot more on Instagram, you know, photos, videos of what's going on in the dairy, you know, the whole, you know, the farm, the cheese making process, the people behind the cheese. And, you know, social media is such a good platform for doing all that through little videos and photos and little backstories, and the public love it, I think. I mean, they do also love a picture of a really gooey cheese. I mean, Jason's absolutely right. If you want lots of likes for a post, if you do a really gooey cheese porn shot, you will get lots of likes. You can do a nice post about, you know, the cheesemaker who's worked there for 20 years, and it will get quite a few likes. But I think it's about sort of having lots of strands to your message on social media, because there's loads of content that cheesemakers and cheesemongers have, and they're not taking advantage of it.
Patrick, I'm going to ask you not to give everything away, because there's much more from you to come. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you for joining us at the Cheese Set. I hope that it will be a sort of mutually rewarding experience over the next months and years. I think that all that remains for me to say is, just a couple more words about the Cheese Set and what we're looking to do. So we're still in our fledgling state. We've actually yet to net our first customer, but we are, I suppose, the rest will cringe at my saying that because it's I'm going way off topic. But yeah, I suppose just in an air of openness. I mean, we've been planning this for a year. We've had conversations, and we want it to, I suppose, gestate correctly. I think we want it to come together to assist the industry. We're not all in it for a fast buck, because if any of us had said, right, okay, what rich seam of cash should we mine, it may not have been the artisan cheese sectors. Anyway, so our next, I see Eric sort of perspiring at me going off topic here. So I suppose is what do we do next? And we've been thinking of an annual business health check, or a business health check service. And we want to, it's a sort of an MOT for cheesemakers, a checkup that covers everything from new product development, finance, sales and marketing, succession planning, but every aspect of what the cheesemaker can do or might have questions on. And if there's a topic that we've left unsaid, we will provide the sort of the intellectual input from somebody within the industry as part of the cheese set. As I said, we're sort of dynamic. So I've got one final poll for you, just again to help us sort of gain an understanding of a need for what we're doing, whether we are on the right lines, or maybe whether, well, you'll see the questions anyway. So I'm going to launch a poll. It's just one, again, entirely anonymous, so there'll be no follow-up on this. But the question is going to be, what do you think of the idea of an annual business health check for artisan cheesemakers? Again, anonymous, will not profit by your honesty, nor will we be offended by your honesty in your answer. You'll see why I say that in a second. So I'm going to launch the polling now. If you could take a minute or so. This is for everybody, not just the cheesemakers. So yes, it seems that many of you think that it's in principle a good idea, right? We'll forge ahead with that, and we'll do something about it. So as I said, the cheese set team should stick to their day jobs. Nobody thought that. It's very kind, very generous of you. Or maybe we disabled that button, who knows? So I'm just going to stop sharing the results now, and we are going to come to a close, I believe. Well, thank you so much, John, Catherine, and Jason, for being tremendous panelists. And I look forward to reviewing what's being said. I mean, half of my mind has been on timings and bits and pieces, and I didn't even have to ring the cowbell more than once. And that was a token gesture because Jason had already finished. So very good panelists all to time. Eric, is there anything that more we need to cover, or?
No, I don't think so. Thank you very much to those that posed questions, and to the wonderful responses from the panelists. Thank you very much.
And to Paul, anything that remains to be covered?
That's everything from me, and I've got some cheese to go in town now. So
oh gosh, yes, you need to turn it. They'll be slightly harder. The cheese is everything, not webinars. So, well, tell everybody about your new cheese. Go on.
Well, I decided in the middle of lockdown that I was going to set up another cheese making business. So I've done that with my partner Eula here on the outskirts of Berlin. So yeah, so it'll all go.
And how can we get it?
At the moment, you'd have to try very hard to get a flight to Berlin, but that may change in the future. So,
we'll send our couriers to pick up.
Absolutely, to be continued.
Lovely.
And thank you from me to the panelists.
Well, thank you all. Unless there's anything else to be added, we'll draw it to a close. As I said, we will.
Can I add,
yes,
just
of course, John, sorry.
Briefly, just in this lovely discussion, marketing, social media, the slightly unreal world. Let us, and I know we won't, let us not forget that there's a wonderful job of retail theatre done in shops to sell artisan cheese properly. So let's similarly support that the last quarter of this year too.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I think Jason, before we came on, was talking about two pillars and one of them very much being the cheesemaker, but the other the route to market through, as John mentions, the theatre and the people actually selling the cheese and putting it in front of people and letting them taste it. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, if you have a delicatessen or an opportunity to sell cheese, and if you're not giving people tasters, it's harder now because of COVID restrictions. But it is an absolute fundamental thing, and the knowledge. But it's getting that piece of cheese onto somebody's palate and allowing them to experience it, and that's more than words. And I think there's a lot to be learned about theatre on the high street.
But I don't necessarily see online sales as removing sales from bricks and mortar either. I think there's a lot of new customers coming via online, and that's great. But I don't see them as alternative. I think there is an opportunity there to extend your sales by having both.
Very good. Well, thank you all. We will be in touch. I think we've got everybody's details that were on the not only panel but all of the attendees, and so we'll be sending a link to everybody who joined with a recording. And for some of those who registered but weren't able to join. So thank you all. We'll be back with another webinar probably in the new year. We've all got to get on with our day jobs and also our new health check service. You'll probably hear from us on that in the next probably 4 or 5 weeks or so. Thank you all, and well, enjoy the rest of your evenings.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks for
Thank you
putting
very
it on.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.